Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dreamscript and this is the Rough Cut Diamond Mines, the place I go to find the rough ideas that we can then maybe turn into something a little more polished. We're now in video 10 of the Cursed Relics Art Challenge, and after the last video, I'm feeling very excited to keep the momentum going. So let's just jump right into it and see what we get this time around. So, pulling back up our list, day 10 is a mirror, and boy, oh boy, is a mirror an object loaded with history and any number of examples of superstitions I could pull from. Like, you have to understand, the oldest example of a man-made mirror we've discovered has been one of obsidian made about 8,000 years ago in what's now Turkey, and ever since then, mirrors have had so many associations attached to them. They are portals to other worlds, vessels for containing and summoning the souls of the departed, scrying surfaces for seeing the past, present, or future. They can tell the truth, they can tell nothing but lies, and everything in between. They can be used to grow one's confidence or shatter it in a second. Carriers of bad luck if you damage it, and all kinds of things. I literally have an entire world history of possibility for this prompt. And you might think all that possibility would give me choice paralysis. But I already had a couple of ideas on what I could do. Obviously, by the nature of where the prompt is coming from, a list of items with curses attached to them, the mirror has to have some kind of dark element to it, obviously. Whether the curse was intentional or unintentional doesn't really matter much right now, just that it has something wrong with it. Or maybe something a little too honest? Let me explain. Now, clearly I am a demon of the Black Depths. That's my home. But this may surprise you to know that I truly believe with the depths of my soul that there's very little that is more chaotic and terrifying than a truth you do not want to face. Trust me, with the mentor I've had, I have become very familiar with the idea that shattering a comfortable lie at the roots has devastating effects on the people who learned to love the lie. I will say that there are ways that this can be very good for people, especially if you're someone who has unfortunately suffered from any kind of abuse in the past. The lie being whatever your abuser used to justify their actions, and the truth being that it was never your fault for their actions, because they were never actually about whatever you did or didn't do. It's a rough and painful thing to unlearn, no doubt about that, but it's worth the effort to do so. But that's a little heavy for this particular video. Going back to the mirror element, the idea of a mirror that shows things for what they really are is far from an original concept. Mirrors that reveal the true nature of things is a common shorthand in media to do the whole things are not always what they appear or true self trope. Like, if you've ever watched a show that had a character walk in front of a mirror that reflected another form they could take, you know the trope I'm talking about. But since I wanted this to be an element of the mirror rather than the characters standing before the mirror, we needed to add more to the mix. I still have to pick my sticker for this one after all. Let's see, what do I have? Ooh! This one. Say hello to the heart of the beast. And no, I don't actually know if that's the name of the sticker itself. I tried finding it, and I couldn't find the sticker by itself. But seriously, if whoever made it did not name it that, they seriously missed an opportunity. Either way, when I look at this sticker, I get some serious dark fairy tale vibes from it. Like, darker stuff than the grim fairy tales, and yeah, those do exist. Just look further back into any story's history, and you will find out. Start with Little Red Riding Hood and get back to me on that after you find out how dark that gets. Probably don't read that one to your kids, but have fun! Now, these two make me think of all kinds of different angles for how this mirror could be cursed, but to narrow down my focus, I think I'm going to need to get my curse severity. So, you guys know how it goes. Spin! Oh! Debilitating minor again. Huh. Well, that sucked a lot of the more fun options off the table. Maybe it's the whale's way of telling me I've been going a little too hard on the curses lately. That's fair. But still, a mirror that debilitates somebody in a subtle way by slowly revealing the truth to them. This is going to be another one where the story's going to be doing some seriously heavy lifting, isn't it? Well, at least we have our elements now. Let's get the refinery going and make this cursed artifact. Now, like I said, considering how the sticker is, I felt it right that I take this in a dark fairy tale kind of style. Not necessarily goblin core, but definitely in that sliver of the Venn diagram between that and fairy core. So lots of foliage and natural elements, which obviously included the antlers for a striking silhouette to the mirror. Which, as you might expect, means it took a little bit of time to make sure I was balancing these things right when it came to all these elements. And I wanted to be sure that I also incorporated some additional elements from the sticker itself, beyond the normal ones, I mean. The idea of a mirror that has visible veins that shrink and pulse with the potential power within it is just peak cursed artifacts energy. So yeah, those got thrown in. I'm a simple creature and I'm weak for the use of humanoid anatomy in places they have absolutely no right being. Though, all while I was drawing, I still didn't have a clear-cut idea of how the mirror would fully work yet. As the process went on, I started playing with the idea that, like I said, maybe it was an item that was just a little too honest, but at the same time, maybe one that was a little encouraging? Is that the word I want? I think it's the best one for what I ended up coming up with. I think of it as someone kind of saying, I see what you are now, but look at what you could be! Something that sees both the mask you present to the world and warns you not to become too attached to it, because it can also see what you're masking underneath. And I mean, that can go any number of ways depending on who's being told what. And in my story, I do plan to show two ends of that spectrum. It started feeling a little bit like the magic mirror that the evil queen in Snow White had, but instead of vanity being the only thing that makes it worse, which mirrors of any kind have a history of making worse in any case, cursed or not, I thought it might be more fun if it appealed to more of a inner or true self. It's that see what you could be element at work, and helping somebody realize either their true potential or to make them confront the monster that they actually are is something that is wonderful for drama. But to see what I'm actually talking about, why don't I tell you the story of what this mirror did to a kingdom's rulers, both for good and bad. Enjoy. Small note before I start this story, I know that I always put up warnings in the beginning of these videos about the themes that I discuss in them, but for this story, some of those themes are heavier than usual, so I just wanted to verbally reiterate that this story will discuss themes of abuse in various forms, especially neglect, emotional, and physical abuse. Even in my heavily fantasized stories, if these are topics that are upsetting to you, please don't feel obligated to listen to the story for any reason. If you just want to watch the speed draw, by all means, go ahead and mute the video, or just skip to the very end if it's that upsetting to you. I'll understand completely. Take care of yourselves. No worries. And in the meantime, let's actually get to the story. No one could actually remember who had gifted the mirror to the royal couple. It had arrived with a number of other gifts during the wedding, and had been shuffled around so much, being such a large object, that it eventually just ended up being pushed to one side and nearly forgotten throughout most of the day. The only way anyone knew it was a gift at all was the included note with it for the king's new bride. And that note was ominous, to say the least. The note simply read, "For when you wish to know what you really married, and who you are." The new queen looked at this note in confusion. The note sounded like somebody who knew her new husband, and quite well at that, which already concerned her because as far as she knew, she was her husband's only wife. He hadn't been married before that anyone in the kingdom had warned her about. But the suggestion that somebody knew what she was really getting involved with
was uneasy, and the mirror itself was certainly an unusual one, like a mirror that had been left in the forest for any number of years and allowed to have the forest itself begin to merge and reclaim it before being found and brought to them. And also, the king was a kind and gentle man who hadn't cared about the humble beginnings of her family and was a loving and devoted husband to her. Everyone knew that. He had no secrets that needed to be revealed. So, once again, the mirror ended up being put somewhere to keep it mostly out of the way, and the new queen tried to put the note to the back of her mind. The first few years of their reign together was wonderful and peaceful. They cared for their people together and, in quiet moments, showed their care for each other as well. But as time went on, cracks in their happy life began to emerge. The first trouble was the fact that despite all their efforts, they had yet to have a child. The need for an heir could not be understated for any royal couple, and their constant attempts being met with nothing after so long was all the fuel needed to start the whispers of infertility among the staff and court. At first it was the couple in general, but as more and more time went by, the more the rumors started pointing the blame solely at the queen. And these rumors began to lead to the second problem: the king's waning affections towards her, and with it, a change in his attitude towards her. He slowly began to be sharp with her, snapping at what he deemed unnecessary questions or suggestions, which then turned into any questions or suggestions of hers. Scared of her husband's growing rage and ashamed of the rumors now running rampant throughout the lands, the queen remained within the halls of the castle, shying away from anyone who came to visit. Many days she just wandered through the halls, listlessly as all her queenly duties had been stripped away one by one. And it was in this state that the queen rediscovered the mirror, kept under a drape in a spare room of the castle. It seems that the years of neglect had not affected the mirror or the foliage on its frame one bit. The grain of the moss was just as vivid as the day they had received it. The branches had even grown new fresh leaves in that time, as the base was covered in fallen ones from the fallen winter. It seemed to be growing just fine, even locked away like this. If only I could say the same for myself, the queen thought to herself as she gently touched the mirror's surface. She thought it looked a little dull, but that could be a combination of dust, pollen, and the dimness of the room it was in. As she stood in front of the mirror, though, something within the mirror seemed to shift, and there was a flash of light that made the queen pull her hand back in alarm. She stared as a form that did not seem to be her own appear in the mirror. It was indistinct, almost like a shape in a mist, but she could make out some features, like the horns that matched those on the mirror itself, and the eyes that stared back at her, wide and emotionless. The form tilted its head as it stared at her, and the mirror's surface shimmered as she now saw her own reflection, smaller than she actually was, shaking in fear, with tear stains all down her face. Tiny, scared, lonely child. Queen's heart ached at the sight, even though she knew it was merely only an illusion. But then the mirror's surface shimmered again, and her reflection stopped shaking, the fear leaving her eyes as she straightened up, now replaced with anger as she grows taller, all while the queen watched the reflection change. Her reflection wiped her tear stains away as her expression hardens into cold certainty, and she can almost hear the mirror whispering to her in her own voice, "I deserve better." The queen flees the room, startled by the mirror, and returns to her personal chambers on the other side of the castle. That wasn't real. she keeps telling herself, trying to calm her racing heart. It wasn't real. She tries to put the mirror and what she saw out of her mind, but the words of it linger with her. Every day the king would either ignore or snap at her for being around him too much. The words floated back to her. I deserve better. She was still queen after all, and he had chosen her because he had loved her and she was qualified for the position. Her family may have once been hard-working commoners in the past, but they earned their position of nobility with their deeds and loyalty to the crown, something that could not be said for every family with rank and title. Just because she had yet to become pregnant did not change how she could fulfill her other duties. Tentatively, she tried to reclaim some of the duties that had been taken from her, like the hosting of guests and arranging of events in the castle, but that's when things got especially ugly, and the king lashed out at her with a temper that she had no idea he had possessed. He started to yell and berate her for trying to show her face to the public again, after she had made him the subject of ridicule with her infertility, as if it were something she had intentionally done. She stared at her husband in shock and disbelief. Who was this person? This was not the man she had married. It couldn't possibly be. Had he been impersonated? Replaced somehow with this angry, potentially violent man now before her? She had to find out. For the sake of her true husband, if nothing else. And what had that note said about learning who she truly married? The next day she ordered that mirror be brought to their shared room, when they were still actively trying for a child. Though it had been some weeks since they had made any attempts, her weak suggestions to try again being only met with cold silence or disgust. Tonight she wanted to discuss more important things, though. What they are now and how that may affect the kingdom. The conversation was not going well, though the queen does notice that her husband was actively avoiding looking at the mirror. Had he also looked into the mirror before and seen something that frightened him? And there was one thing that he said that struck her as odd. I will not be seen as weak. Who in the world ever saw her husband as weak? When the rumors of infertility rose, they were at them both initially, but very quickly shifted solely to her. Never him alone. So where would he get the idea that anyone saw him as the weak one? She glanced at the mirror when he said this, and it's almost like the mirror wants to answer her question as the surface of the mirror shimmers again. Out of the corner of her eye, she sees the reflection of her and her husband. Hers starts as that tiny, crying child she saw before. But his is also a small, scared child, wearing a crown far too big for him. Then their two forms start changing. Hers becomes that tall, cold, hardened version of herself. But again, it was her husband's reflection that surprised her. His form stays on the smaller side, the crown never fitting him properly, while his eyes grow manic and full of rage. The queen can almost see fire coming out of the reflection's mouth as he speaks. The king also sees the reflection out of the corner of his eye. And instead of responding with fear or concern, he lashes out once more, grabbing the chair from the nearby vanity and smashing it on the mirror's surface. The mirror shattered, and the pieces fell to the floor in a shower of glass and pieces of wood from both the frame and the vanity chair. The queen backed away in shock at this act, while the king breathes heavily in his anger, rubbing one of his eyes and chest as if he had been hit by the flying glass. But as he turns back to her, she pales, seeing the disgust and rage having grown tenfold in his eyes. If she had thought he was acting like a different man before, now he looked the part of a madman with those eyes. After that day, The only time he would touch her was to cause her pain, yelling that she was at fault for everything that failed in the kingdom, that it was only her punishment that would set things straight. All lies, she knew, of course. However, she couldn't just leave. This was not some minor transgression between two lower nobility. She was the queen, and he was the king. If she did try to leave, he would only have her dragged back, and then things would be worse, or he would simply take out his rage on some other poor soul. So she allowed her heart to harden as she endured for the sake of her people. And a few years after that began, war descended on the lands. A would-be conqueror invaded the lands, and suddenly the royals had bigger problems than the lacking of an heir or the change in their perceptions of each other. The king now had to leave to lead the armies. His hatred and anger now properly channeled into battle, and suddenly all of the kingdom now had to look at the queen they had mocked for leadership. Which, considering their treatment of her in the last few years, certainly made them all nervous. But she took to the new position, not with vengeance in her heart, but with that cold sense of duty she had learned to channel. She made sure her people had food, shelter, and safety within the kingdom, while also ensuring supplies were regularly delivered to the troops at the edge of the kingdoms. The news of her husband's death on the battlefield was met with cool, calm indifference. She allowed herself and her kingdom time to grieve the loss, but as she felt the man she had once loved died years ago, she did not take long to carry on with the needed duties at hand. She took to the battlefields herself, leading the fight to protect her people, not allowing herself to be taken by that same rage that had devoured the man she married. Because she knew they deserved better, and she would be better. Okay, like I said, maybe I went a little heavier on the story than I normally do for these videos, but still, we made it through all that. Thanks everyone who did watch this far into the video. We still have 5 more of these videos to go for this particular challenge, and I promise that the stories will be a little more lighthearted from here on. Oh, geez. You know, I just realized that I don't even know what we're gonna do once this is over. But we'll get there when we get there. Until then, sweet dreams, everybody. And here's to all the little things that bring out the magic in you.